Good afternoon, everyone. You're very welcome to the CitA Tech Trend Series 2021. My name is Alan Hoare from TU Dublin. I am your chair this afternoon. This afternoon, we're going to be looking at digital transformation of the Irish construction supply chain, a perspective from SMEs, but in particular a focus on e-commerce. And I suppose the challenges of gathering data and gaining consistency so that we can streamline the business processes in construction in the future. So we're delighted to welcome our four presenters this afternoon. Sean Dennison is the Head of Engagement and Technical Standards at GS1 Ireland. And Sean will be kind of introducing the concept of GS1 standards and also coming back later in the program to look at why persistent interoperable product identification standards are really needed in the Irish construction industry. We're also joined by Andrew Hewitt, who's the Strategic Business Development Manager for Chadwicks. Andrew will be giving us a sense of the digital transformation that's taking place in the Chadwicks Group. And also Dan O'Gorman, Asset Lifecycle Lead at IFAC Solutions, who'll be looking at, I suppose, improving product selection, resulting in increased, I suppose, profit sales and lower embodied carbon outcomes. We're also joined by a guest from Sweden, Leonard Skog, who will be coming in to speak about GS1 identifiers in construction and e-commerce in the construction in the Swedish construction industry. So you're all very welcome. If you have any questions that you'd like to place for our speakers this afternoon, please put them into the chat facility and I'll be able to look at those as we go through the presentation. So good afternoon, Sean.
Thank you, Alan.
So if you'd like to, you're very welcome and thanks for taking the time to join us today. So if you'd like to start your presentation.
Yeah, sure. So I'm delighted to be here, able to talk to you today, and I want to thank CitA for giving me the opportunity. We're going to have some great presentations from Andrew, Leonard, and Dan. They'll be describing solutions that they have implemented or are implementing using GS1 standards to solve real-world problems. Since they'll be referring to GS1 and our standards, I thought it would be useful to give you a short introduction to GS1 and a few of those standards. So GS1 has been around since the first barcodes were scanned back in 1974 in the US. GS1 is owned by our members, over 3,500 of them in Ireland, and we are present in 115 countries. Our members include all the household names that you'll be familiar with in manufacturing, in retail, DIY, and healthcare. Many organizations in construction are now also adopting GS1 standards because they're tried and trusted, widely used, open, interoperable, and persistent. All of these are important attributes where built assets are going to be around for a long time. In Ireland, our focus initially has been on retail, which is where we came from, consumer packaged goods, but also in healthcare, transport and logistics, and DIY. So we're trying to help our members to use the same standards that they use in their core business, in their construction projects, and in building operations. We are a global and neutral, not-for-profit, member-owned organization where standards are developed by the members from the bottom up and made freely and openly available to everyone, including non-members, solution providers, and technology companies. GS1 actively works with many other standards organizations around the world, such as ISO and CEN, and also with Building Smart International. Our standards coexist and augment existing standards. Over the years, some GS1 standards have become ISO and CEN standards, and many GS1 standards are based on subsets of those standards. GS1 standards make it possible to identify, capture, and share information automatically and accurately about products, locations, assets, organizations, and more. Identification can be of companies, products, locations, logistics units, assets, and service relationships. Capturing of information can be by scanning barcodes or scanning RFID tags. and the data can be shared using traditional flat files, XML documents, IFC files, and by using APIs. There are many GS1 identification keys, but I want to focus on one today that you'll be hearing about. It's the GTIN, the Global Trade Item Number, also commonly called an EAN or UPC code. It's the basic building block for many standards. It's used to identify products, components, raw materials, and other basic entities. Other identifiers of note are the Global Location Number, or GLN, used to identify physical locations, and the Global Individual Asset Identifier, which is used to uniquely identify an asset, such as an air handling unit, or a pump, or an electric motor. The GTIN is an 8 to 14-digit number, usually expressed in a barcode. So it's the barcode number that you already be familiar with. These numbers can also be used for construction products. They can be serialized so that a unique instance of a product can be identified and traced from manufacture through construction and building operations and right through to the recycling. This is why interoperability and persistence are so important for the construction sector. The product can be anything used in construction, such as a consignment of wood, a pour of wet concrete, or a bundle of rebar. A basic linear barcode, such as the GS1 128, can help identify and capture the fundamentals of traceability, such as GTIN and batch number, serial numbers, and production or expiry dates. 2D barcodes allow for the transfer of more detailed information, which in turn enables additional business processes. RFID tags can be used where access is limited or to track moving objects or consignments. Here are some examples of data carriers. On the top left, you'll see a combined direct part marked data matrix or 2D barcode. And behind that, there's an RFID tag embedded in the tag. On the top right, you can see another direct part marked data matrix in combination with human readable data. And on the bottom left, you can see an all-weather label showing the data matrix holding the consignment code. This can be scanned to give a breakdown of the content of the consignment. Next standard I want to talk about is the Gs1 Digital Link. This is a relatively new standard, only coming out in the last 2 years. It combines the global reach of the Gs1 standards with the power of the internet. By scanning a Gs1 identifier, such as a GTIN, an application using a structured uniform resource identifier can direct a query to a web-based resolver to direct it to the appropriate source of data and information. So a simple app can scan a barcode, format a digital link compliant URL as shown in the top right here. The GTIN and the serial number uniquely identify the object. The link type in the query tells the resolver what kind of information is requested. The query is then directed to the appropriate repository using HTTP or API or a similar protocol. The information is then returned to the requester's browser or smartphone or desktop app, and it can be stored. The information behind all of this can be stored either by the brand owner or the manufacturer, a supplier, a retailer, or a facilities and building management system, or by a regulator or any third party. Each is responsible for maintaining the data and information which they hold. This can be context and user sensitive so that only the appropriate and relative or relevant information is made available. In construction, this could be product data sheets, purchase orders, declarations of performance, environmental product declarations, test results, and in the future, building product passports. It could also show where the product is in a BIM model, for example. The data retrieved by the Gs1 Digital Link can change over time. So as parts are replaced in an asset, as new information is added, or we may want the original documentation that related to the version of the product that we have and not to the latest model. So new sources of information can be added as new cases emerge. It is not necessary to hard code the data to the product as currently happens on product labels. So I'm going to hand over to Andrew now to give you the story of Chadwick's journey in digitalization, which has been a long one. They're old members of GS1, so very happy to welcome you, Andrew.
Thanks, Sean. Over to you, Andrew. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name's Andrew Hewitt. I look after digital transformation within the wider Chadwicks Group, and I am in the business quite some time, but really what I wanted to talk to you today was about the digital transformation journey that Chadwicks has been on and where we stand in that journey at the moment. As Sean alluded to, we are in the business for a considerable amount of time. Parts of the business go back 200 years, and the evolution of that business has very much been on the question of transforming the business over time from originally a coal and steel importer through into what we are now. So it's been a constant level of change and development over that time. And indeed, as Sean mentioned, we've been working on things like EDI and standards for many years. And indeed, I worked with Alan on a South Dublin Chamber initiative, I think some 20 years ago, to try and standardize the invoicing process. So it is something we're very interested in. We are the market leader in terms of building materials, steel stockholding, plumbing supplies, and obviously part of the wider Grafton Group. And within the Grafton Group, obviously businesses like Woodies and the wider group then in the UK, the Netherlands, and indeed in recent weeks an acquisition in Finland. So we wanted to, I suppose, underpin all of our digital transformation with a digital vision. And the idea of the digital vision is to really underpin what we're doing as we go along this journey, and that we summarize it as this. So to lead the Irish merchanting sector in the adoption of digital customer engagement, driving value for customers and enhancing the ease of customer transactions, thereby driving brand loyalty. So for us, the customer has to be at the heart of the digital transformation that we're doing. We are not interested in developing websites and transactional elements just for the sake of it because everybody else is doing it. We really wanted to add value to the customers, to solve the customers' pain points. So obviously then we asked the question, well, why digital? Well, clearly we've got to maintain the competitive advantage that we have through our market leadership position. We are the largest in the market, and we've got to show that leadership. Obviously, as everybody is aware, the consumer profiles and behaviors are changing radically at the moment, and there are technology opportunities for us in terms of customer engagement, and that's only going to accelerate. But we're also using the opportunity to look at re-engineering established work practices within the Chadwicks Group, so that digitization becomes a catalyst for change in the wider group. But it's not an easy journey, and anybody that has gone down this route will have come across internal barriers. And in our case, we started the journey with, multiple ERP systems, seven or eight of them, many acquired over many years, and that had also led to multiple cultures, multiple views of the customer, and indeed multiple brands. So before we can really go down the route of digital transformation, we really got to understand how we dealt with those areas, and we did it through what we called the power of one. So this is really to try and generate a single view of the customer, a single culture and direction, a very core customer experience to make us first choice, and underpinning that a single brand and a single message. So the power of one was really an internal piece to align us for the digital transformation journey. And as part of that, we had to address this. So 16, 17 different brands, many familiar household names around the country, where we had acquired business over the years, but this does not lend itself to digital, supporting a digital message. So we had to really focus in on the primary brand, which is now Chadwicks, and those destinations brands in a couple of places we've retained just because they are so significant in the markets in which they operate in. So Cork Builders Providers is the largest single site builders merchant anywhere in Ireland or the UK. Telfords have a very strong offering in electrical in the Midlands. Davies specialise in plumbing and heating and drainage, paneling centre for kitchens, and indeed heat and steel. So we're maintaining those destination brands. But ultimately, the job was to try and come up with what we call the key digital enablers, and that is getting everybody onto a single platform, and indeed the single brand that I referenced. So these were very big elements that we had to address within the business. But effectively, we now have a very clear view of what it is that we're trying to do and where we're trying to do it. And those digital outcomes are very much based on customer solutions and really trying to put the customer at the heart of what we're doing so that we can solve issues for them. So we really want to look at transforming the customer journey and their experience. And obviously, as Sean has alluded, that requires us to interact right along the supply chain and gather the information that's needed when we need it. So we're really focusing on digital to solve those trade pain points and come up with time-based solutions that really can develop a positive response for our customers. So as I mentioned, we see digital as a catalyst for the operational change that will underpin that. It is very much customer focused on the trade, looking in particular at the larger contractors and really the SMEs, because we see this as the biggest opportunity. It has to be mobile, it has to be mobile first, and it has to accept that there are changes in demographics. So there's a whole generation of our customers who find this all very uncomfortable, and yet there is a whole new demographic coming through that finds this essential. So we have to find a path between those different generations. So in terms of the journey we've been on, we broadly split this down into three, I suppose, real areas: digitization, digitalization, and digital transformation. And we define, if you like, digitization as really turning some of our existing analog processes into digital processes. We then move into digitalization, which is effectively looking to see, can we do things better by using digital technology? And there are elements that I'm going to take you through that we're in the middle of that. And then finally into digital transformation. And for us, digital transformation is this idea of just a full end-to-end strategic approach that has digital not highlighted as digital, it just becomes the norm. So this is at the heart of everything we do in terms of our strategic direction going forward. So for us, it is those three stages. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes just to go through some of the elements that we have looked at in there. And as Sean suggested, we and indeed Alan, we have been looking at a number of these things for many years, and we have been involved in standardizing invoices within the supply chain, and in particular looking at barcode coding and using standards where they exist and trying to leverage that as much as possible in areas such as vendor managed inventory and so on. So I apologize for all the acronyms on this screen. I will get through them fairly quickly, but we started in particular with document management. So this is very much digitization, taking all of our customer documentation and making them available through portals and so forth. So immediate access to invoices and credit notes and statements and so forth. We would also see vendor managed inventory into that space as well, where effectively over the last 4 or 5 years, we have given the control of our stock levels in our branch network over to our key supply partners. And that requires an exchange of data that would have been unthinkable in previous years. But effectively what we have done is we share our stock files with our core partner suppliers. We establish with them a minimum and maximum stock range, and we effectively give them the responsibility for maintaining those stock levels on the ground. Now, underpinning all of that has to be really good quality data and really good quality exchange of data. So for us, that has been a very substantial journey, and it has been transformational. The idea of a sales rep coming in to take one of our counter guys from behind the counter for a large amount of time to process an order, when all of that can be generated electronically, has been a significant change for us. So the purchase order is created electronically. In some cases, we're looking at good faith receipting, where we don't even check the goods coming in. We base that on good faith receipting, not in all cases, but then we monitor the stock levels and the range levels, and that the category management exercise then becomes much more associated with managing the range as opposed to doing the manual processes of maintaining it. So to move on then, as we got into the journey, we realized that we couldn't really develop our digital plans without a very sound product information management element, and I'm going to take you through that in a second. As part of that, we also had the tracing and management of our steel, because there are some specific requirements associated with steel. So that MTR stands for mill test reporting, so that's our ability to produce a steel mill test report for every individual piece of steel that we supply. Electronic proof of delivery, obviously e-commerce forms a significant part of this as well, but for us it's very much not the only piece. And then as we look forward into the future, we see the opportunities in such areas as big data analysis, clearly BIM, but we've really got to get the standards and the information shared, as Sean has been alluding to. And then into the future, what does artificial intelligence and augmented reality and so on, what do those mean for us? So I wanted just to focus on a couple of these areas because I think they're relevant to what we're talking about today. So the requirement for us on product information was to have a really good, consistent source of product data. And to do that, we created a PIM system, a product information management system, and rendered that information available to colleagues around the network through a branch portal that we developed, and indeed through a supplier portal to allow our supplier partners to interact with us and enrich the data with us. We supported that with a content coordination team, and the idea of that is to generate the declarations of performance, the product data sheets, the reach information in a consistent and easily accessible manner. And then as we look into the future, we have to start looking at loading up that sustainability information in there as well. So very briefly, this is what the branch portal looks like. It gives access to all of our categories. It gives access to the brands that we interact with. But this is probably the most relevant piece, which is rich product data. So this wouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but we look at the product information, the features and benefits, the dimensions, the categories. We also in the background have the recycling information, the product, the WE information, and so on, and the specifications. But ultimately, we then are looking to include the the product data sheets and the declarations of performance. The huge challenge we have here, though, is that this is us doing this. We are gathering that from every supplier we have, and every other merchant in the country is doing the same thing, and none of us are coordinating what we're doing. So every single player in the market is doing the same exercise, and they're doing it for themselves. We have to do it. We have no choice. We have to supply this information, but getting it in a consistent format is a huge challenge for us. So in our case, we've developed a supplier portal, which lets a supplier log on and download their product range with us as they see it, upload that in a bulk format through Excel sheets and so forth, images, product data, declarations and performance. But again, I stress we are doing this independently of anybody else in the industry, and we know they're all doing it as well. So for suppliers, this is a real and fundamental challenge, because if we're asking for it, lots of other people are asking for it as well. So to come up with some sort of standard, some sort of consistent approach would be hugely helpful and is really essential for us going forward. Just to demonstrate it, though, we do have one element of the business where we've made more progress on this than in others, and this relates to the steel mill test report system. So as I said, we are required to be able to produce a consistent link from the steel mill all the way through to the end use for our steel customers. So in this case, effectively, we capture each individual piece of steel has a heat cert number on it, as you'll all know, and that is obviously in some cases attached or etched or indeed magnetically attached to the piece of steel. But we effectively, when that piece of steel enters our business, we link it back to the original mill test report that was created at the time of manufacture. We ensure that link is accurate and that it works, and then that sits in our database, and when we are in a position to sell that steel, we provide that mill test report for the individual piece of steel that we've sold. So this allows us, much like farm to fork in the food industry, to track mill to end use. And this is, I suppose, for us, the first step into this sort of integrated data modeling approach, whereby we're loading up this level of data to our customers, because it is essential that we're doing that. And this for us certainly has shown us a means and a way forward. But again, we've done that independently and standalone from the industry. The benefits for that are really substantial for us. That's what the steel mill test report looks like. We're allowed to, match the goods in queue to the mill test reports. We can search for them. We can print and email those for customers. And our hit rates on this are exceedingly high at this stage, in the 99.99 at this stage. So we're in a position to really support our customers on that. Briefly, I just talk on electronic proof of delivery and collection. So this is also a journey we're looking at. This is, again, digitization to try and transform the way we deliver and handle materials. And this is part of this wider context that we need to look at. So at its simplest, it's electronic proof of delivery and collection, using photographic evidence as necessary. It gives us great visibility of our fleet, so we can give much better information to our customers. It allows us to do route planning and communications with our customers, and indeed internally if there's any discrepancies on the orders. It helps us with compliance, and obviously we see a potential for us for significant savings within our logistics operations going forward. So this is very much standard. You'll all be familiar with this. But for us, this gives us the ability to start to look at the removal of paper from our organization, and the replacement of that with electronic information. And as Sean said, the use of product identifiers within that is definitely the next step for us. So that is something we're particularly interested in, and I'm very eager to hear the presentations on that. Sustainability is something that will come up later on, but for us, this is a hugely important part of what we're doing at the moment. We're looking obviously at practical pieces we can do at the moment with reducing the amount of paper, with electronic invoicing, the use of electronic vehicles in our fleet, and then partnering with other organizations to see, well, what is it that we can do to really reduce the footprint. But we have to do so much more in this space, and in particular we have to be in a position to provide the sustainability information with every product we have. And again, we really need an industry standard to do it, to allow us to do this, because the idea of us trying to gather all this independently from everybody else is just not practical. So then briefly into the future and where we see clearly there's BIM is a huge part of it, and we have to find our home within BIM. We have to find the place that we occupy within this schema. And really the idea of product data for us is absolutely at the heart of that, and a consistent centralized data source, which we play our part in. We're not necessarily originating, but we play our part in to make sure that data integrity is followed through with delivery, with specifying, and definitely into the future in terms of sustainability, asset management, and product lifecycle management. These are hugely important areas for us, not just at a Chadwick's level, but a group level, and we really have to find a sustainable way of gathering and processing that data. And clearly, as we get further into this, big data presents huge opportunities for us, and in places like data science and analyzing customer behavior, lead generation, digital twinning for our approaches to our mechanical processes, logistics management. So these are substantial areas that we are interested in and very much active in, and obviously then into artificial intelligence for personalization and customer service, and in particular around demand forecasting and so forth. So these are part of the future direction for us. But ultimately, this sort of circular construction journey is, we need to play in this, and we need to find the right place for ourselves in this. But we do see ourselves playing right the way around the product life cycle, not just in terms of inspiration and product choice and into installation and support and post support, install, service and maintenance, but also into end of life management. So just to conclude, given my 20 minutes is now concluded, I really just need to highlight the challenges we face, and they are all data related. Data, coming up with a product standard and information basis that we can use consistently around the industry to deal with the challenges of sustainability, of coordination, of a more connected supply chain, and indeed dealing with the, a certain level of customer apathy out there and the generational challenge I referenced. So these are the challenges. We see the potential for the sort of systems that Sean has been looking at, but we definitely have some ways still to travel on this. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Andrew. Fascinating insight. Lots of challenges, obviously, your business is facing. Could I just ask maybe one question before we move on? And that is I suppose, the front desk interface with the customer coming in, buying materials. I have experienced this with your own company in recent weeks, and actually things have moved on. Payment is done in a secure mobile, using mobile and so on and so forth. But you're obviously dealing with suppliers, so you're a merchant. You're receiving materials from other suppliers, selling them then to the public. To what extent do you see that the customer interface and the removal of paper happening over the next few years?
Well, it's a key aim for us, and indeed in terms of our supply chain, that we're probably somewhat ahead of that. In that, in terms of EDI and so on, we're doing an awful lot of automatic matching of invoicing when it comes up. And I think the most recent statistics I have, I think we are up to something like 85% of supplier invoices into us are auto matched and so on. So that has a huge benefit for us in terms of how many people we need to process invoices, but also in communications with our customers. And our challenge is to do that, the same thing at the other end of the supply chain, is really to make those customer interactions with us as seamless as they can be. So we really want to deal with customers where they need to be dealt with in the manner that they wish to be dealt with, in as efficient a process as possible. And that's very much at the heart of where we're going with our digital strategy. So the removal of paper, automatic invoicing, the electronic proof of delivery, it's all part of a journey, but we still produce a hell of a lot of paper because actually customers still require it in many cases.
Yeah. And do you see an appetite amongst your fellow merchants to come together and reach some form of agreement on data sets and product identifiers?
Well, I mean, as we've been down this journey, we've been hugely frustrated by the lack of available standards that are industry accepted right away around the industry, right away through the supply chain. And this has been a huge challenge for us. So the lack of, if you like, a consistent approach to those has meant we've had to go and replicate what every other merchant has done in terms of creating the data sources and maintaining them and so on. So we tend to be, as an industry, very parochial about our data. We very much look at maintaining our data, seeing it as a competitive advantage. But I really think that going into the future, with the sort of ambition we have in this space and in BIM and various other places, we really have got to find a way of opening up the data sources and getting consistency of data, and we need to share in that process.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see some traction with that over the next number of years with various sort of government-funded initiatives and so on. One final question for you. The review by Paul Morrell in the UK on construction product testing, do you see that as having any implications for Ireland, or would you be aware of this?
I'm not fully aware of it, but obviously, just we are constantly we have considerable operations in the UK, so we do share a considerable amount of information with our UK colleagues. But obviously, in terms of the Irish market, we are still dealing with the aftermath of Brexit and where standards exist, whose standards exist, and what are the So we have an awful lot of our suppliers have had to get European standards put in place and so on. So that is an ongoing challenge.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks for that breakdown of digitalization, digital transformation, and the difference between them. That was very useful. So thank you for that. So we're going to move on now. Now we have we're delighted to have a guest from Sweden, but we have we're going to be sharing Lennart's presentation in a few minutes. So what we might do is move on to Dan. And Dan, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Alan.
And you're going to be very provocative, I understand, this afternoon.
I don't think so.
And you're going to throw a grenade into this. So listen, thanks for coming along, and we look forward to your presentation.
And thanks for the invite, Alan. And Andrew, a very interesting presentation, and I hope my presentation complements what you've achieved in Chadwicks, because myself and Sean have worked over the last couple of months on actually taking what you talked about there into the construction industry, and actually beyond the construction industry into the FM area as well. So as you can see in my heading here, it's about initiating improved product selection based on proven Nordic processes. So I've taken the Nordic solution, and I will show how this can be used effectively, and actually leads on to what Chadwicks are achieving. The result is increased profitability, because we're all in business to make profit. Lower embodied carbon, because this is now everything that we do. If people want to sell a product, they're now emphasizing that they are green. What are they doing about embodied carbon? What are they doing about operational carbon? Also looking at, as Andrew indicated earlier, looking at higher efficiency. And as Sean indicated at the start, GS1 have been instrumental in driving efficiencies across a range of industries, from logistics to retail to manufacturing. In the case of logistics, we all now have couriers coming to our house every day. They don't walk around with paper pads. They use GS1 codes to actually record that the package has been delivered. So moving on to the next slide, quick introduction to IFS. So we're a leading building information management solution. We're a GS1 Ireland Platinum partner. We ensure a single source of truth. And this is critically important in the construction industry, in that the information that's actually generated during the design, the construction, the commissioning, and in the operation is of huge importance as we go forward, especially in the area of embodied carbon, in the area of ensuring that a lot of the materials that we use today in construction will get a second life. We see this now and every day when you see the planers coming in the day before and planing off the road surface, and then the following day the same aggregate comes back with a little extra tar and is relayed down on the same road. This is totally different to what was happening 20 years ago, when they just laid tar on top of tar on top of tar, and eventually they had to raise the footpaths. Again, this is a very good example of the circular economy and how materials can be used. But I feel we should not stop with aggregates. We should bring this into the whole realm of everything that we do in construction on a top-down basis. We're also secure environment. Everybody talks about security. We've seen the impact of breaches in security recently with JHSE, and this is critically important with all the data we collect during the construction phase. So moving on then, is that climate change has had a huge impact. We're seeing this with the enormous increases in temperature in the west coast of Canada recently. We've seen it with unusual weather patterns and how the ice caps are melting and so forth. So we all have a duty of care there. And construction, believe it or not, creates about 38% of the carbon that is impacting the environment. We also have to look at change work practices. Come last March 2020, nobody ever thought we'd most of the population working from home. But this again is driving change, phenomenal change. In fact, digitization has been accelerated by 5 years. So what they expected to do in 5 years has been achieved in little over 5 months. So phenomenal change has happened because of COVID. The other area is now, a couple of months back actually, if the air handling system failed or the chiller failed, you just open the windows and open your top shirt button and put up with it. Now, because of COVID, the operational and FM staff have become critically important to the operation of the building, because if the air conditioning isn't working, they have to vacate the building because of the fear of the transfer of partisans as far as COVID and so forth. And COVID, unfortunately, I don't think we've seen the end of COVID. I think it will continue, so we have to look at that. So as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, all these changes have actually driven some changes in what we do. Coffee beans now, you can actually scan a QR code and you can actually find out the source of that coffee code, something similar to what Andrew was talking earlier about steel. this is happening off of the shelf in the coffee. So this sets an expectation with customers that they will expect the same from their building suppliers and their designers and architects. Fraud is a big problem, counterfeit products. You can have a very expensive air handling unit that somebody goes on the web and thinks they're on a legitimate site, orders, as you can see here, a bearing. That bearing's put into an air handling unit, and that 12,000 air handling unit is now redundant because the original supplier of that air handling unit will refuse to honor the warranty because a non-compliant part was used, and it could have been innocently actually installed. So we have to ensure again from a GS1, and they have those standards to actually ensure that this is etched in, and you can actually validate back to source that this is a genuine part. Little did anybody think that we'd be looking at menus through an iPhone. Again, this can be reflected now in construction, where things like this are happening on construction, as I'll show you later. If you go into a Hilton room, you can see now in a hotel room, you can see accountability, and this tag is on the door. If you hire a car, it's the same thing with Avis or Hertz or any of these. It proves that the last person who actually was in that vehicle or touched that vehicle was the cleaner, and that cleaner has followed standards that gives you the guarantee that you will not contact COVID if you take away that car. And again, this is about accountability, but again, you can see it's using QR codes for validation purposes. Finally, on this slide, it's very important that when we build buildings, we don't build them just to look good. They have to be able to accommodate the needs of the occupiers of that building, not just from day one, but all through the life of that building. So it's critically important that the information and feedback from end users is actually brought back into the design. And again, this can be achieved using GS standards, procedures, and common protocols. So the answer is provide all users with greater access to data via simple scan and GS-enabled tag. As I said from the outset, you couldn't run logistics, you couldn't run courier services, you couldn't run manufacturing, you couldn't run retail. You could imagine if you went to your local Spar shop or Lidl or Dunnes Stores, and the person, when you came to the counter, the person said, well, can you go back to the shelf and find the price for me? And then you head back and you come back to the counter and you give her the price, and then she types it in. You'd think that's crazy. You'd also think it's crazy if you saw people inside in the storeroom of your local Dunnes store sticking labels onto product before they went out on the shelf. Unfortunately, that's the case in construction. We stick multiple labels onto mechanical equipment during the course of construction, instead of using the original asset tag, which hopefully could be GS1 standard. And then that information is carried through all the way through, using that tag as the common denominator and source of information. Moving on, then you can look at what are we doing with GS1. So I'm going to spend some time now taking what Andrew and Sean said and putting it into practicalities of construction. So you can look at here at plan, you can look at validate, you can look at order, you can look at receive and construct. I'm delighted to see that Chadwicks have actually taken the digital era on this, because it was back 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, this would be totally paper. But at the end of the day, now our clients, which is what we do in IFS, is looking for that validation of information, so that if something goes wrong, like what happened in Priory Hall and unfortunately with Grenfell Towers in the UK, there is traceability back to source. Who decided what? Was the planning okay? Was the validation done? Was it ordered according to the plan? In other words, if somebody specified a particular specification, was that ordered? Was it received? Was it received and was it stored temporarily on site in a proper manner? Did it infect the warranty? Did we construct it according to the recommendations of the original designers of that product? In case of cladding, did we use the right screws? In case of windows, did we use the recommended screws for that level of wind surface? We could look at maintain. Did we follow through with what, again, the people who designed that product, do we maintain it on an annual basis? You take windows, or were they oiled on an annual basis or not? And then people ask the question then 2 years on, well, why did that window stay failed? The recommendation was that it should have been oiled. It wasn't, therefore who's to blame? And again, using GS1 standards, we can actually scan in, scan out, and show and prove that that window was actually maintained properly. Not too dissimilar from your car service manual, that when you're selling your car to a second-hand dealer, the first thing they will ask you for is the logbook, the service logbook for that particular car, so that you have then the confidence in knowing that that was serviced by a legitimate car repair company or car maintenance company during the course of its life. If they can't produce the logbook, would you buy it? No. Same thing applies in construction as we go forward, because we're forced under recycling to actually show that we have recycled the product. And we have to plan at the start that we're going to recycle that product. It's not a matter of turning around 5 years into the project and then saying, oh, we now have to look at recycling. We have to build with this in mind. And you have to provide feedback as well. Again, the whole area of feedback is very important, as I'll explain in a few minutes, because companies' reputations can be destroyed if you can't get feedback when something goes wrong. And I'll articulate that in a second. So as you can see on the top of the left, you can see building commissioning and design. You can see here the whole area of delivery. And again, Andrew was very explicit on how Chadwicks are doing this. We're taking this one step forward of actually taking that step and the information that's gathered up to the point of delivery, and how do we bring that into the construction sphere. So that same technique that Chadwicks have perfected, how do we ensure that the guys installing those windows have all the right information? Then the digital handover. For those of you in construction on this call, you know the nightmare of BCAR and having your CDE platform and having gathered all that information, particularly if you're dealing with subcontractors, how difficult that is to get. Why can't that be just transferred at construction phase, or sorry, at delivery stage? So as soon as the money transfers, why can't the data transfer as well? And again, I'm delighted to see that Chadwicks are doing that. And Sean mentioned Digital Link. As I'll go through this presentation, I'll explain how Digital Link can be to the advantage. One of the key areas that we have to look at as we go through these slides is the whole area of operational maintenance. I'm going to spend some time explaining how we can use the tags that have been installed during manufacturing stage and ensure that the products are actually worked perfectly. And to be fair to GS1 and Sean and his colleagues, they've created a video that you'll find on their website that it illustrates this a lot more articulate than I will do. I was a bit nervous about showing videos today because usually they are problematic, as we all know. And then again, here I want to talk about building decommissioning and recycling, and then the reuse of materials. Why can't windows be reused if we treat them like second-hand cars? Why can't we have logbooks to prove that these windows have been properly cared for, not just from oiling, but properly cleaned? Has anybody ever used a brace of cloths or chemicals that have an impact on the glass? And then why can't these windows, the opes of these windows, be picked up, and then a new building is designed in the future that will actually use that information? So again, it's continuing on what the retailers are doing and actually getting these windows a second life, which is what we all need to do as we look at products. It was mentioned at the start of the call about the timber price and other metals and other carbon related products have gone up in price. What we're seeing today in the last couple of months, we can blame Brexit, we can blame COVID, but that's the future. Gold is a precious metal. Why? Because it's a scarce commodity. At some time in the future, iron ore could become scarce. Copper could become scarce, especially if the environmentalists don't allow sea dredging and so forth. So the only product we can actually find is on the landmass. So therefore, we have to look at how we can actually reuse the materials that we have today, because they have to be considered. So it's about sustainability, not a premium cost. So the key area here is you walk into Harvey Norman's and you buy a fridge, and you've got a problem, because you look at the fridge and one is 100 quid dearer than the other. Why? Because one is A++, the other one is A. And then you ask the assistants, well, why is 100 quid extra? And he'll say, well, you save 6 quid per year in electricity. Well, therefore 6 quid or 10 quid a year. So that means the fridge has to last 10 years before I get a payback. These areas have to be considered. And how do we actually use that effort, that like what Chadwicks are doing and what Sean and his colleagues across the world are doing with GS1, to actually bring down the cost and bring efficiencies, but get it across a huge range of capabilities. Starting with design, as you can see here, this is the specifier, this is the operations person, and this is the architect, right? So the specifier, under the new way of doing things, now has to work to targets. They do not exceed sustainability targets. Again, the reason that Chadwicks have to produce the product data sheets and their suppliers have to provide them is because now you just can't consider just the cost or the look and feel of a product. You have to consider what is embodied carbon, what's its longevity, if it's a mechanical piece of plant, what pieces of that, what has to be swapped out, that and when. and what's the cost of that? And then you've got transportation as well, which has to be all included, which I'll show you in a second. This person here is again using feedback and using GS1 standards. This person can tag and bring back information as long as there's an index used that could be Uniclass or any of these products, and she can actually relay back their building experience. So this person is taking into consideration buildability as well. We've all talked about offsite modular construction, which is the savior of the industry. Has to be, because we need to build faster, better now, and we don't have the skill set that we had before. So we have to look at how can we build as much as possible offsite. Outside in Intel, they've moved 4 to 5 million originally planned site hours to offsite construction simply because of COVID. As I mentioned earlier, has been a change. So what's changed? 5 years ago, if the hot water came out of the hot tap, the cold water came out of the cold tap, the roof didn't leak, the doors opened and the windows closed, you're happy out. What's changed is these new targets have been set, as you can see here, where the RIBA, Royal British Institute of Architects, have now set standards. So in 2000, if you have to cut your operation energy by a quarter by 2030, which is not far away, your body carbon, you have to cut it in half. And then things like CO2 levels, total VOCs, and formaldehyde, we have to look at meeting targets. So this job has changed. This person now has to look at the maximum. Take a typical example. The architect or the designer or the client says, I want to change the amount of fenestration on the windows because I want more natural light. If the windows are originally designed as aluminium, because of this person, now they may be forced to change over to aluclad simply because aluminium has a higher embodied carbon than timber and aluminium aluclad windows. So simple, so it's changed, and therefore it requires product. So again, Andrew mentioned about getting consistency. The Nordics have this down to a T, and I'm taking one particular supplier, co-builder, which we've worked closely with in IFS and GS1, and we're working to building a proof of concept on this. As you can see here, again, the G10, this is a window. It's got all the information, it's got the properties, it's got the classifications, it's got the documents, BIM files and components. If you look at the properties, which I'll show in the next slide, it's got everything that you want from about that window that is necessary for its design, for its future use, for its sustainability, and it's a bottoms-up approach. Again, classifications, if you're working with an American company, it shows Uniclass versus Omniclass. If you look at documents, it has all the documents like the CE certs, as Andrew mentioned. All the documents are there, and they're all entered by the supplier once, not by each company actually adding in their own information. We got the BIM files, we got the components for the spare parts, and how this is made up, because a chain is only as good as its weakest link. So what is the weakest link on this? It could be the handle, could be the door frame, could be changed out. Everything is tracked, and this is the future. Just like logistics and everything else, and this is a product data templates you can see on the right. I mentioned earlier about the product data sheet. You can look down here and you can see radioactive waste disposal. I mean, little did anybody think 3 years ago that you'd be looking at the radioactive waste disposal of a window. Did anybody think you'd be looking at high integral waste lighting systems, nominal height? We expect that. Solar factor, thermal transmittance, total use of non-renewable primary energy, etc., etc. So all this information is available, and the key is the GS1 tag, right? So moving on then to environmental impact. So coming back to this diagram I showed you earlier, and there are many BREEAM, LEED have all these standards, but I'm just taking the RIBA and looking at this. So how do we actually, so we start with this bottoms-up approach. We look at aggregating this information together, gives us an overall target for the project. Look at Green Deal, you can look at the BREEAM, you can look at LEED, you can look at, as I said at the very start, how does the customer think of all this? You can have a great green building, but if it's not suitable for the needs of the user, then has it worked? It hasn't. Because at the end of the day, these are the people who pay for it, these are the people who work in it, these are the people who want to feel safe within the building. Does the architect know? Again, using these standards, using Uniclass, Unicode if you're in the US, you can actually read back and learn by the mistakes of others. Every project in construction is unique. And that's one of the biggest problems in construction, as Alan and his peers in TU Dublin recognize when they're teaching their students. That's the difference of construction. It's not like manufacturing where the same car is turned out over and over again, and it's constantly tweaked. Every building is different. Unfortunately, we don't learn from the past. But as I said earlier, the fact that we're bringing in modular construction will actually change that. Look at Nicorette, is a Swedish company. They now have a carbon neutral factory. Nicorette is owned by Johnson & Johnson. The marketing people in Johnson & Johnson will tell you that they can sell more Nicorette simply by having a symbol on the packet that says this has been manufactured in a carbon neutral factory. This is the future. This is why companies have to pursue, not just from a feel-good factor, but it also makes good business sense to sell green. And Chadwicks have a green depot opened up in Dublin recently, and in Galway, and they've emphasized that there's the sustainable materials. Everybody has to chase this. But getting to those sustainable materials is, you have to start, if you take the case of the window, is this glass got the right lead content? Is this timber from a sustainable source? Is this aluminium actually go through a smelter that uses green electricity or hydrogen, which is the future? Do we know who assembled this window if something goes wrong? Do we know that when it's actually delivered, and it's going to be delivered in the right sequence? Again, GS1 uses SSC codes for shipping containers throughout the world. Why can't we do that with modular construction? Why can't we get the same level of control as shipping companies enjoy with containers, with modular systems that we send to manufacturing onto site? Because 10 years ago, before modular became prominent as it is now, the site manager walked around the site in the morning and knew instantly how well the project was progressing. Now, the same person has to contend with modules, critical modules being manufactured 100 miles, 150 miles, 40 miles, 10 miles out of the site. So he and she is dependent on this. And again, using GS1 standards, he could get a check that says that all the materials required for a modular unit have actually been delivered to the offsite facility. And then if the offsite facility guy, and if the fact is they weren't delivered and the offsite facility guy comes back and says, oh, we're progressing well with your module, he could just check his record and say, well, how could you be progressing? I've no digital record of that information being provided. Again, the health and safety, as you can see here, everybody wins. The employer's residence engineer can check and validate what was specified was actually delivered. So if these windows were originally white, according to the record, but the architect and the client had agreed a couple of weeks earlier to change them to black, well, then she's got a conflict. The system could be smart enough to actually look at this. And again, Andrew mentioned about BEM. This is BEM taken to a next step, where you're actually using the GS1 standard, using the product data sheets that Andrew mentioned and I mentioned with CoBuilder, and actually ensuring and validating they're correct. So it all works. Again, the health and safety wins, the contract manager wins because they can update the 4D and 5D BEM simply by the receipt of the information. So all the work that the likes of Chadwicks are doing can now be continued on into the construction sphere. Finally, then, we have to look at the whole operational side of things. So this is the plant room. I mentioned earlier that GS1 have created a video on this. You'll find this on the IFS website and our GS1 website. Okay, Integrated Facility Solutions is the company I'm working for, IFS. So you can see here, you can put G10 tags on this. And again, this is the same Jane that we talked about earlier. She can actually look at a piece of plant and validate that the design specifications are actually what she expected. Jack can tap and gets a history of who did what last. Again, from a warranty perspective, very important. Jack is just safer as he scans, so he can look at the upstream using the BEM model. He can actually check, okay, if he takes out this valve, what's the upstream and downstream impact of him impacting that valve? Again, with a GIA number, you can actually look at how long it should have taken to actually go and install that particular product. You can use a GLN, which Sean mentioned earlier, which is a global location number, to actually put that maintenance person enters the plant room and can check, scanning this with its handheld device, what other PPM, that's planned preventative maintenance activities, could it carry out in that particular point in time. And then you can look here, then this can validate from a health and safety perspective that this person here, Jack, has the right skills to actually perform the service on this particular thing. It's nice having an electrician doing a plumber's job because this would void the warranty. And in the case of these sophisticated systems, as I said at the outset, these now have become critical to all offices because these have to be in working order. If you don't have air handling, if you don't have air changes, you've got problems. So therefore, this has now become critically important. And again, going back to the design, if we're looking at low carbon and operational carbon, have the considerations that were taken on board by the designers, i.e. I'm going to pay an extra premium for this particular boiler here, simply that, on the premise that it's going to cost less to run, it'll last longer, it'll have less consumables consumed. Well, then, even though it's more expensive from a capital perspective, was it actually used? Contractors do take shortcuts. So how can you actually ensure this? Again, it's validation and checking. Going back to what, again, Andrew said about steel, it's about this. Nearly the last slide, and this is an interesting one, in that we all face a situation with problems with the products we buy. Why can't we get to a situation where the craftsman simply can read this and actually raise a trouble tick, not with the contractor, not with the architect, but the original supplier, and put the supplier on notice that it has noticed an endemic problem with the window. This is a much better solution for the suppliers, and this is why we're talking to Northern, which is probably the most refinery in Europe, in that they would get the feedback. They would amass that feedback using big data and using AI and analytics, and say, wow, we've got a problem here. Was it back to assembler having a bad day, didn't use the right screws on the stays on this? And then that's a much better situation than this person appearing on the RT1 news saying, well, the reason that child fell out the window was I've been flagging this to the management for 6 months, saying that those stays weren't fit for purpose. And that's not good for Northern, it's not good for the building owner, and certainly not good for the child that fell out the window, right? Hopefully it was the ground floor, but this is what I'm trying to get at, is that we're able to feedback. So suppliers win from this capability as well. Again, what I've covered is the whole area of prolonging the lifetime of the product. This gives you an extra 8% of prolonging life. We can talk about sharing, we can talk about material efficiency, we can talk about reuse building components, we can talk about waste reduction. But this is the biggest bang for the buck, because back, if we did nothing, we'd go up to 208 million tons, and then we'd go up here from steel, plastics, aluminium, and cement. As I said, we're dealing with stone for the planers on the road, we're dealing with steel, we're using plastics. But we now have to look at prolonging the life of materials simply by taking better care of them. And this is then the logbook I talked about here, the tag in, tag out. This is all the information that we looked at earlier. So when the building comes to be demolished, then all this information is of use to the person reselling those windows, done deal or whatever. So all that information is available. And then what you end up with then, sorry, I went too fast there, final slide.
You're just finishing now, are you, Dan?
Yeah, just finishing now.
Thank
so
you. Yeah.
This slide is the final slide, so that's it. So, okay, right.
Sorry, Dan, for cutting across there. Fascinating insight there. I suppose the consistent message that's coming across from all three presenters so far is the importance of sustainability, isn't it? That really, I suppose, even in a post-COVID era, we're going to be in a different sector. It's going to be there'll be much more demand for sustainable products, and businesses are going to be much more streamlined and more sustainable in how they approach product selection and so on and so forth. So thank you, Dan. Your mention of the Nordic solution really brings us on to our final speaker. So have we still got Lennart with us from Sweden?
Yes, thank you.
How are you?
Yep.
Are you able to share your presentation?
I hope so.
Okay, if not, I think we have a backup, I believe.
We do.
So it's great to have an insight from NCC in Sweden. Lennart, you're very welcome. Lennart is the category manager based at NCC, and he's going to give us an insight on the use of GS1 identifiers in construction e-commerce in Sweden.
Do you see anything?
Not as yet. So our backup is for Suzanne to share the slides. Is that right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
We have a recording of the presentation, Lennart, if you're not able to share.
Yeah. You can drive that.
Okay, Suzanne, if you want to drive that presentation.
Do you want me to try that? Okay.
Yes, please. We were just having a few broadband issues from Lennart's location.
Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so let me just move.
So you want to enlarge it? We're doing okay on time. Lots of information being coming our way, but really useful.
Hello, everybody.
My name is Lennart Skog and I work as category manager at Group Purchasing in NCC Sweden.
Can you hear that?
Yes.
I called my presentation Gs1 the Bridge to Hello everybody.
No.
My name is Lennart Skog and I work as category manager at Group Purchasing in NCC Sweden AB. I called my presentation Gs1 the Bridge to Traceability, Data and Information, and it will describe the story of the Gs1 decision in Sweden. I have worked with purchasing in the construction industry for more than 46 years and for the last 32 years at NCC. In 1998, I became the first category manager in NCC with the responsibility for wholesalers and related building materials in the Nordic market. And I'm still engaged in the category management organization. I have also been involved in the development and implementation of NCC's purchasing systems and with an industry engagement as well. I was one of the initiators of the Gs1 group, which in April 18 took the decision to use Gs1 as a standardized article identifier in the construction industry in Sweden. The bullets in my presentation. I will begin with a short presentation of NCC. Then I try to explain why we need a standardized article identifier in the construction industry. Third, a description of how the Gs1 decision was worked out, and then why Gs1 Gs1 fits as standard article identifier. At last, the reactions of our decision. First, a short description of NCC. NCC works in the Nordic region in 5 business areas, but with 3 business models. Industrial with the NCC industry, working with asphalt and paving, crushed rock material, foundation works such as piling and also with reinforcement manufacturing. Construction and civil engineering with NCC Building Nordic and Building Sweden, which builds houses, industrial and commercial buildings, hospitals, etc. And then infrastructure, working with infrastructure projects such as bridges, railways, tunnels, road construction, and so on. And then we have property development, working with the development of the offices and commercial properties for sales. As you can see, Building Sweden works entirely in Sweden. Some figures from last year. We had a sale of 58 billion Swedish crowns, which is approximately 5.6 billion euros. And we had 15,500 employees. As you can see, Sweden stands for nearly 60% of the turnover. And that the construction and civil engineering stands for 76%. And now, why do we need a standardized article identifier? There have been a need for a standardized article identifier for a long time, and everyone has wanted it. Everyone in the industry has been aware of this, and there have been discussions, but we have not been able to agree on which one to use. It has become more and more obvious in connection with digitalization in the construction industry and the use of VDC and BIM models. Today's focus on sustainability and the demand for traceability of the products we use and built in, its contents and properties, means that we must ensure the exact identity of these and the possibility of follow them throughout the life cycle and value chain, from manufacturing to disassembly and waste product handling. A standardized article identifier with an established set of rules is crucial for the management of article information and data in databases, and for the development of systems and applications such that supports it. In NCC, we stated that the Gs1 Digital could be the standardized item identifier that we and the construction industry needed. In spring 2017, we had discussions with the Gs1 Sweden about the possibility to use Digital in the construction industry. The answer was yes, of course, and we will be more than happy to help and support you, but you must do the job. In June, we contacted the other major construction contractors in Sweden, Skanska, Peab, JM and Veidekke, the industry organizations, Bygghandlarna, which is the Association of Swedish Building Material Merchants, Byggmaterialindustrierna, the Building Materials Industries, RGF, Swedish Pipe Wholesale Association Plumbing, SEG, Industry Association of Swedish Electricity Wholesalers, and some other stakeholders, to inquire about the interest in and the possibility of a joint initiative regarding Digital. And they were all positive. We had the first meeting in the Digital group in the beginning of September, and after another 3 more meetings, we agreed on a common statement that Gs1 Digital should be used as a standardized article identifier in the information carrier in the construction industry in Sweden. The decision was announced on the 12th of April 2018 in a joint document and with press releases from those who signed the document. Why Gs1 Digital? Digital is a developed and well-established standard with a clear set of rules. It is global and there are opportunities for local stakeholders to influence and develop. There are a large number of standards within Gs1 that can be used to handle different needs in the value chain. There are no limits for the numbers of Digital, and the cost for using Digital is insignificant. The traceability of an article and its data is secure as long as you follow the rules and regulations and knows where to find it. What happens after the decision? The reactions were entirely positive, both in Sweden as well as global. It seems that it was a decision that everyone wanted, but no one proposed before. In the autumn 19th, the stakeholders in the construction industry in Sweden agreed to start the Gs1 Digital User Group Construction Sweden with the task of adapting and developing the regulatory framework and the implementation of use of the Gs1 Digital in Sweden. To emphasize the decision on Digital and the importance of that the work with the implementation progressing, the Digital Group expressed a strong expectation that all stakeholders will take their responsibility and participate in this work. We also expressed an expectation that the work now being done in Sweden will also be promoted within Gs1 internationally. This is a prerequisite for tying everything together and enabling a global construction industry. This is the document in which the Digital Group announced the decision of Digital with the heading in blue in English. Industry Joint Initiative on standardized identification carrier of construction products. The future requirements for sustainable buildings, traceability, and an efficient digitized construction process requires that there is a common identification that follows the entire life cycle of the construction product. We, a collaborative group in construction, call on the industry to demand that the global article number GTIN be the common standardized identification for all construction products. And now an example of how the decision was noticed in Sweden. The headline, Big Wins with Unique Identity for Building Materials. What is going on now in 2021? A draft for the GTIN management standard for construction products has been worked out and was accepted by the user group Construction Sweden in the spring. The expectation is that it will be the foundation for a global Gs1 GTIN standard for construction. The process for that will start in August. After 3 years, the need for traceability is still, if possible, even greater now. Therefore, the GTIN group discussed to propose a limit for the implementation of GTIN. And that was all from Sweden. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Leonard. Well, if there was ever any evidence, ladies and gentlemen, of the need for this in Ireland, it's the Swedish example, is it not? So what I might ask is for the presenters to come back on video. And I have a question for Leonard. Really interesting presentation. My question is, who are these people that you managed to assemble this? Who are the stakeholders that would have signed this?
It is the 5 biggest contractors in Sweden. It is BIM Alliance, which is developing BIM. And there was the Swedish construction material community, and it was wholesalers.
We have all of them in Ireland, have we not?
Yeah, I hope so.
We have the Construction IT Alliance. We have very large contractors.
Yeah.
We have very large merchants.
Yeah.
Why can't we do this in Ireland? I'll open that to the floor. Can we do this in Ireland? Leonard, that was fascinating. 46 years of experience.
Yeah.
My God.
Yeah.
I'd say that's fascinating.
Yeah.
How were you involved personally, may I ask? Were you involved in the group?
Yeah, I was one of the initiators together with my colleague in sustainability, which has the biggest problem with traceability.
Okay, so over to you, Andrew. Can we do it in Ireland?
Where there's a will, there's a way, I'd say. I mean, I think it's very useful to be able to see an industry where this has been implemented to whatever degree. I mean, in the Irish building materials business, we do have a fairly fragmented source of supply. There are a number of players that have a large market share, but there are an awful lot of smaller players as well. So
yeah,
it requires leadership. It requires the adoption of standards, and in particular for our suppliers, both locally and internationally, to be aligned, I think, on this journey.
Yeah, and you know, if you had an example of tier 1 contractors coming together for the common benefit, and the tier 1 merchants coming together for the common benefit, then that just makes sense. And then the SMEs kind of flow into that, you know. That's really what's needed. So it seems to me that GS1, there is definitely an opportunity there, Sean, is there not, for Ireland?
Absolutely, and I think it's, I mean, this has been done elsewhere, all the other sectors. So if you take Chadwick's, for instance, is the Dunn Stores stroke Tesco stroke Super
Yeah.
Value of Ireland. So the retailers in that sector have done it, and they haven't, as Andrew said, they haven't considered data to be their kind of unique selling point.
Yeah.
It's what they can do with the data that's the unique selling point. So I think the standards are there. We see from Sweden and what Dan has outlined that the solutions are there. So it's really getting the industry together to accept, as they have done in Sweden, that this needs to be done, and to maybe get together a group, a user group, and GS1 would be very happy to
that would be great.
That.
Just to say, the Build Digital project has a particular group pillar. I believe it's public knowledge now that TU Dublin have been successful along with CitA, and that this program will involve a particular drive for digital procurement and digital supply chains. So there's going to be, and the government want to see this happen, you know.
Yeah, and this is something that could be delivered because all the building blocks are in place. So it's not something that we have to invent. There are no missing parts. There's certainly a lot of discussion to be held about how to do it and when to do it.
But you know, when you listen to you, Sean, and to Andrew and to Dan and to Leonard, like it's quite a big piece of work to be done. It's quite complex, isn't it? And every organization, whether you're a contractor or a merchant or a supplier, have your own challenges. But the one thing about Build Digital, it's 5 years, so it's quite a, you know, we could do something in that period of time. And I think Leonard, it was great that you could share this with us today, because we could learn from what you have done in Sweden, you know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to closely. Yes, Sean.
Just had one final slide because you asked a question. In the
yes, of course. You were going to wrap things up for us.
Yeah, you just asked what were we doing or what are Irish members doing. So a nice example is a company in Kilkenny. If I can get this to play.
Yeah.
The company in Kilkenny, HSD, Highway Safety Developments, they produce all the signage and manage all the signage for our motorways. And for some reason, signs tend to move on motorways. They move out in front of people and people crash into them. So there's often disputes about where exactly the sign was, what materials it was made of, how much glare was coming off the paint and so on. So they need to track for forensic reasons, if nothing else, everything that goes into the sign, how it was made, what paint was made, where it was located, and the maintenance that was carried out on it. So they use the GS1 data matrix, which you'll see on the back of these signs if you get close enough to scan one of them, to uniquely identify each sign and to be able to respond then when there are issues with them. So that's just one concrete example, I suppose, of what's. But we have about 150 members in the construction DIY sector.
Yeah,
they tend to be the people who supply Andrew, I think. So it's mostly on the DIY side that people need to put a G-tin. So you might need to put a G-tin on a 25-kilo bag of cement because it's going to be sold through DIY, but you don't put it on the large consignments going to the construction site or the batching.
Yeah, and I know, thank you. I know that you've all spoken about the why, and I know particularly Leonard did that, but why is persistent, interoperable product identification so important in construction when there's so many other important things? Why is this important for, let's say, for businesses going forward?
Maybe Dan, you could answer that one.
Unfortunately, people die because of an ability to actually track what was the intention versus what was actually delivered.
We saw that in Grenfell.
So that's one thing. Two, the 38% of all carbon is actually produced in the construction industry, and then the operational aspect of construction and the built environment. So we have to address that, and it's an easy win. And finally, then, is that a product is only as good as how it's maintained. So, as I said in the presentation, if you buy a car, you need to service it. If you buy an air handling unit, you need to service it. And we need evidence that has actually been carried out for everybody's benefit.
Yeah, and of course, Andrew, you were saying that you're dealing with the same suppliers that other merchants are dealing with, and you're all having to do it again and again and again and again. So it just makes sense, doesn't it, for you to come together and to progressively try and fix this problem.
Well, I think because this is international. We're dealing with an international supply chain. We would feel that the suppliers in particular have work to do in this regard. If there was a coordination at that level, it would make it so much easier. Because they're facing the same questions not only in Ireland but right across Europe, and we're all just a part of that. So I think the international nature of the supply chain means that's where the data, and ultimately that's where the source of truth for that data is. It has to come from the manufacturers.
Yeah. And
okay. Well, listen.
Sorry, Alan, cutting in.
Yes, Sean.
There is actually a group called the DSIBE, Digital Supply Chain in Built Environment, which is an international work group that includes many of the suppliers and manufacturers, as well as construction companies.
Put details on the chat, or maybe send those details on to us, because we'll come back to this topic probably in the autumn and as we move into 21 as well. So listen, thank you very much, Sean and Andrew, Dan, Leonard, and the CitA team for their support in the background. It's been a kind of an intimate setting, hasn't it, really, in that it's a small but learned group of people were with us today. And of course, but this will be available on social media.
And on the YouTube channel. On
our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So we're just going to keep the lights on this one, and we'll take a little break now until September. But I would like to speak to you about our plans for September. So if Shannon could kindly share details of the slides, some final slides, Shannon or Suzanne.
Sorry, I'm sharing still.
Sorry, Sean, if you could unshare there. And if we have, so just moving on to, I suppose, our signature event for 21 is CitA BIM Gathering. This is the 5th installment of this. Due to the continued public restrictions, health restrictions, we have to maintain a virtual non-presence, I suppose, the virtual conference. We put a huge amount of work into this. We have, these are just 3 examples of some of the speakers that will be at the event. Rebecca DiCicco, Director of Digital Node, Thomas Bock, probably one of the best minds around construction robotics, and Alan Watta, who has some insights into the whole cultural change that's needed in digital transformation. So we have I believe up to 6 keynote speakers now all confirmed. The program is now on the website. We're just sort of fine-tuning it now. We are hoping for great support for this event over the 3 days, the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of September. We are all in holiday mode. There's a lot of people away on holidays, but we're hoping that ticket sales will start to increase now as we move into the remaining of this month and into August. You can see details of the options there. As a not-for-profit organization, we have to wash our own face, but so this event, it's important that we get the support. So nationally, internationally, please pass around the details of this event, and we hopefully see you there. So again, thanks to our speakers today, to you, our intimate audience that joined us, and to the CitA team. We're going to be back with you again, I believe, in September, looking at construction robotics as we continue to look at the remaining trends that are transforming the industry. So just want to wish you all my best, good health, enjoy the summer break, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, Andrew.